Welcome everybody to my talk. This is quite a mouthful of a title, isn't it? Goal and hallmark of scientific projects of Christians. Still, I mean it, and I mean it as a continuation a little bit of what Tony said in our previous session, answering one of the questions. He said that if you talk to people and want them to take action against the pressing problems of that the planet has, you don't want to overwhelm them. You want to give them something which they can actually put their hands on and get going. So for our network, I thought I'd like to try to introduce this for us as scientists, not as private persons, as people that are concerned, but particularly as scientists in our field, various fields. How can we show that we care for creation? Can we implement that somehow in our projects? It might be easy, it might be difficult. And of course, I can only give examples from my own field, which is medicinal chemistry, drug discovery, and the like. And I hope that you can transfer that to where you are, where you find yourselves as scientists. Like I said, I'm not talking about taking private action, which is also important. But I want to focus on what we can do as scientists. I trust everybody knows about the Sustainable Development Goals. They were meant to be a blueprint to achieve a better and more sustainable future for all people and the world by 2030. That's what they're about. And they're supposed to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So that all makes sense. I think we all totally agree on that. Maybe not on 2030, people have to put deadlines, but then Peter Williams this morning said that we should have deadlines so that we are accountable, at least to ourselves. I will not explain the beautiful pictures of the 17 goals. We will see what they're about in a moment. The SDGs were set up in 2015 by the United Nations General Assembly, and they succeed the only 8, not 17, Millennium Development Goals. I could talk more about the history of how the SDGs were formulated. For the sake of this talk, I left this out. But I rather want to show how I think they do relate to things that the Bible recommends or actually commands or supposes of human beings, particularly of God's people. The first goal is that there should be no poverty. Well, with this first goal, I should make it clear that I think that human efforts will never reach 100%. We all know that. We can try as hard as we can, as well as we can. We will never reach a goal completely on our own. That, I think, is the human condition which Christians and non-Christians usually are aware of. I find in my own surroundings that medical students understand better than science students that there are limits. Because scientific people usually like to say we have not yet. Whereas a doctor, a physician, if he really treats patients, will have to say the sentence, I think we can't do any more. That is a sentence which in medicine you can't avoid unless you want to lie to yourself or the patient. So medical people understand better that whatever goal we set ourselves, we have limits. And that's perhaps for the better than the worse. Anyway, no poverty. Well, I've put some scriptures. You've probably already scanned this slide. I've put some scriptures to show that these goals are actually not new. They have been formulated in a modern way, put together in a modern way. There are things that are very specific for our time and the particularly humanist viewpoint, which is behind most of the people that put this together. Still, I think we can fully subscribe to number 1, because 2 Corinthians says about achieving the goal of no poverty. At the present time, your plenty will supply what they need, so that in turn their plenty will supply what you need. This is, of course, really an admonition to people like us living in a country that has superfluous possibilities. Zero hunger, again, zero, okay. Anyway, for Christians, we even feed enemies. That is not always the case. Like Tony yesterday said when he was asked a question, he said that many people in Niger, whatever you pronounce that, many people were surprised, why do you come here? Even the rich people from our country, rich Niger citizens, don't do what you are doing. Because he doesn't consider the people as his enemies, but he's concerned about everybody he thinks he can help. Good health and well-being. This is, of course, the Lord's example. Quality education, Bible translations, the installment of schools in Germany, my country, was very much the result of Reformation, Martin Luther's ideas. Quality education. So we have that in our spirit. Usually people now say in their DNA, but I think we are more spirit moved than DNA moved, aren't we? Gender equality, there is no longer male and female. For all the others, I will, of course, make the slides available if you're interested. We can always find something in Scripture which tells us how we as Christians would go about this particular SDG. With industry, innovation, infrastructure, I think this is a way of doing what God said at the very beginning, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground. In a steward way of doing it, not by just exploiting things. So all the SDGs, I think, can give us ideas, or we can use them to formulate proposals, to make people understand, why do you do this? Why do you do this research? However, I think I should also mention, as probably all of us are aware, that the SDGs show a major deficiency, unfortunately. Just like the human rights, they have a major deficiency by leaving out God. That is not a good idea. That is not a good idea. So the deficiency of the SDGs is there is no mention of God, no mention of the first commandment, that we should praise our Creator, which is actually something that can fill us with joy. It's good for us, not something we also have to do. It's something we should do, and it will be good for us. And of course, it's what God should get. God should get all the SDG, soli Deo Gloria. And the SDGs also don't mention that it needs salvation and redemption. Like, for example, the example we are always using now, Ukraine. To restore Ukraine and restore peace between Ukraine and Russia will need a lot of money and a lot of forgiveness. Otherwise, I don't see a future for that. So this is something, the SDGs, they're very technical in that respect. And I just wanted us to make aware of the fact that the SDGs are useful, but they lack a major, really major aspect. So the question I would now like to pose before showing examples and talking about examples from research and teaching is, why and what should we sustain? And with this, I would like to make it again very clear, like we've heard in several of our talks, that we as Christians have actually a strong reasons and motivation for caring for creation, trying to preserve it. And this is not a good reason. Naturalism does not have a good reason. This is an example. Please look at the headline first. This is an example where I want to make it clear that people that do not believe in God are not consistent, I feel, in their arguing. Because the naturalistic basis of sustaining creation is very weak. It's emotional. Well, we all know that by panicking and by being emotional, by fearing, like Alistair started his talk yesterday, by dreading, we can't do meaningful action. Maybe it's good to fear, to see the problem, as Tony Rinaldo put it. But to panic and to just be emotional will not solve any problem. It won't. It's certainly not a complex problem like the one we have before us here. So while it's good to be emotional, it's not a sufficient basis. What you're seeing here is the front side of a museum in where I live, the State Museum, Landesmuseum in the city of Halle. 3 years ago, they had an exhibition on climate forces, driving force of evolution. And this exhibition actually said, it was the subtext of the exhibition was, why should we stop evolution? Why should we stop climate catastrophes? Because this is, according to the narrative of evolution, this is how everything came about. This is how life on this planet progresses. So why stop it? Why preserve something when it's about to develop into something better? We just don't know yet what it is. So I think the basis of naturalism for sustaining this earth is rather weak. I don't quite see the consistency of this argument. I see a strong, rational and emotional, I don't leave out the emotional, strong rational and emotional basis of theism for sustainability. So we have all the good reasons, and we have the motivation, and we have the mercy, which is a strong, important emotion in this context, mercy. Have mercy on people that are poor, that are suffering, whose lives will be cut short. Mercy. We have this, and we believe we have it because we believe in God. Christians have a reason why creation should be preserved, because it was created good. We preserve something which was created good. Because why should you preserve something which is on the way to being better, to evolutionary improvement? That is difficult to argue. So people would say, of course, I feel, yes, I am totally with you, non-Christian, when you argue emotionally, but I doubt your intellectual basis for saying, now we have to make a cut, now we have to stop what's going on this earth. I doubt this intellectual basis. I do not doubt your emotional, personal motivation. Christians believe that God wants to heal and preserve life. There were atheists, nihilistic philosophers in the last century, French and German especially, I think. They denied that weak and suffering and sick organisms should be helped and healed, because they thought, well, this is just an accident in evolution. They have to be gotten rid of. But we know that God doesn't want anybody to be lost. Christians believe in human and ultimately cosmic salvation, that God will make His creation new. I would also like to remind you of prominent Christian researchers that actively work for the preservation of the creation. I have put Tony Rinaldo. I had Stuart Pym originally, but now that we met Tony, I thought I'd put him here. Catherine Hayhoe, you can Google her, in the US, a climate activist as a scientist. Sir John Houghton, the late Sir John, I found this quote, for me as a Christian, the implication is that our stewardship of the earth need not be pursued on our own, but in partnership with God. I can personally bear testimony to the value and excitement of that partnership. I find that quite helpful to show that prominent Christians do research, or did research in his case, that was motivated by preserving creation as much as we can. So returning to the basic topic of my talk, SDGs, what is their status in academic research? Well, increasing. Universities and research groups increasingly use them to identify research topics, write proposals, and present research. My university has a sustainable manager, as somebody was a physicist. He is employed by the university, Frederick Boop, a physicist. He was employed by the university to take care of sustainability. All kinds of, like the university wants to become CO2 neutral and a lot of other things. And he and his staff is actively looking for groups in the university that do research that can be sometimes after the fact categorized under one or several SDGs. So that's what's happening in my university, Antitrust. We are not the forerunners in this aspect. Many universities would do that. Here is an example from the United Nations website on academic impact of SDGs. Universities getting ready for the SDGs. So now I would like to get to presenting some examples for us in the discussion today, tomorrow, or later after this conference, to think about, okay, can we implement creation care? I think we all agree with, like what Tony said, creation care, environmental care, we all agree on that. Can we implement that somehow? In this year's European Scientists Network, of course, we heard about Tony's research. Doris shared a little bit what she's, in the past years, engineering, so to speak, her research too, and teaching. I'm talking about the scientific aspect of what you explained to us. Jake Hebert, unfortunately, couldn't come. He was supposed to do the talk, which thankfully Andy McIntosh stepped in to do. But both of them, whether theoretically or practically, are looking at, just like Doris does, looking at the evidence of what's happening to CO2, what's happening to the climate. And there are many other aspects, of course, which we couldn't cover during just 4 days of networking. I would now like to explain with an example from my research and an example from my teaching, how I try to implement this. Because, well, I will explain later why I think it makes sense to use SDGs, to use creation care as a kind of guideline for what we are doing. Because as Christians, we are very near to that, and we have all the good reasons, like I tried to show, all the good reasons to do that, without neglecting the gospel, but I will get back to that towards the end of my talk. Now, I'm not talking about the gospel, as is obvious, but about what we're doing. My first example is from teaching. Okay, so how can you implement creation care in your teaching? With some disciplines, it's probably quite easy. With other disciplines, it takes more thinking, and perhaps it can only be indirect. So what I'm about to set up is an elective seminar, 10 seminars actually, on sustainable pharmacy. Okay, so I'm talking about an example from pharmacy. It's a bit related to medicine. If you want to relate that to physics or engineering, it will perhaps be a bit different. So you'll have to think about it a lot if you think about, okay, how can I do sustainable whatever? And of course, the word sustainable is used inflationarily in our day. We all know that. People say sustainable and they just want to get funds or get proposals through by putting all the nice keywords in. I'm not talking about this window dressing stuff. I'm talking about really what is sustainable pharmacy or medicine? What does that mean? What does it include? So you've already seen it's 10, I've put 10 seminars with different aspects. And as I said, perhaps this is gives you some inspiration. I'll just go through it quickly. So the first seminar will be on what does sustainability in pharmacy and medicine consist of? What does it consist of? What is particular about sustainability in pharmacy and medicine? What does it include? And I also want some ethical foundations to be addressed by the person who will do this seminar. It will probably be me. Then I want a colleague from the medical faculty to define health and disease. This is not as easy as perhaps some of us think. Health and disease are rather complicated. It's about normal, deviation from normal. They're not easy definitions. The goal should be health, but what is health? If we don't define the goal, we can never reach it, of course. Number 3, sustainable extraction and production of medicinal substances from biological material. A colleague of mine that specializes in drug substances from plants and microorganisms will do this. Sustainable extraction. Sustainable means, okay, what about the plants? What about the organisms we are using? Are we exploiting nature so that after a while they no longer exist because we've used all of them for the production of drugs, which could easily be the case? What about the methods, the chemicals, the facilities, the people we use for that? Number 4 is basically the same topic as number 3, just about pharmaceuticals. So drugs, not drug substances, the actual drugs, excipients like lactose and all the stuff you need to make a tablet, water, excipients, something that helps with producing an actual drug, and starting materials. How do we do that? Where do we do that? Where do we get this stuff from? Sustainable production of pharmaceuticals, including packaging material, quality control. This will be done by a colleague from Tanzania, who I happen to know well. He will do this so that we get a perspective from a non-European country. Then a colleague at the Environmental Research Center in Leipzig, a city in Germany. She was a member of my group formerly. She will do a talk on pharmaceutical residues in the environment, especially in water. Because as patients, we have to go to the toilet, and if we have taken a drug, it will be partly or totally released into the wastewater. And what then? And there are some problems with that. Resource-saving use of medicines. Implementation of SDGs. This is something a colleague of mine has asked to do that. He's quite knowledgeable more than I am about international SDG implementations. And finally, drugs in society. So, okay, I will stop here. I hope that this has given you an idea how to do such a seminar. Okay, my second example is from research, a research project which I did between 2017 and 2021. The whole concept I put together in 2015 and 16. It was funded by the German Ministry for Research and Education and by the German Academic Exchange Service. I was the project leader. It funded and funds 9 PhD students, all Africans, sub-Saharan Africans. I wanted it to be that way. And 1 master student from 4 African countries. The countries were Botswana, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and there were people from Cameroon. Cameroon was not a partner, but 2 of the people were from the country of Cameroon. This is the logos, the symbols of the institutions involved, and we spend a little bit of money for a logo, and of course we have a website. We call that Try Sustain. Try Sustain. My university, an institute in my place, another institute, and this is the partners. So what was it all about? It was about Try Sustain, three-pronged sustainability. The 3 aspects being therapeutic, ecologic, and bioeconomic sustainability. Again, this is a mouthful, but it really was what we thought has to go together. If you just concentrate on ecological sustainability, the whole thing won't work. We need the 3 to go together. Like Tony also explained a lot, the network character of what we have to do and have to think about if we want to do something for the environment. The environment is not something out there. It's very near and we're connected to it, everything. So the scientific idea was, of course, you need some scientific substance. This is just words. The scientific idea was we wanted to look at traditionally used African anti-infective medicinal plants. And the research group in Addis Ababa actually has expertise in the development of pharmaceutical formulations based on excipients from African plants, starch, cellulose, and the like. So the idea was, okay, if we look at plants which are traditionally used for particular infections and try to verify or disprove in vitro with our methods that they don't work, then we've done a good thing in protecting the plants. Look, you don't have to collect them anymore because they don't help. Or if we can show that they help, look, try to cultivate them. Don't always take them from the wild. As you probably can guess, maybe I've seen it in your eyes, this is also a transcultural problem. Because some people would say, the subject came up in one of the questions to Tony, this plant has to have grown on holy ground around a church. Otherwise, it will not be effective. This plant has to grow in the wild. If we cultivate it, it won't be effective. And perhaps they are right, because when you cultivate plants, sometimes they lose the constituents. They no longer produce the so it's also transcultural. Here you see one of the Tanzanian PhD students in the Botswana lab, because we had a South-South cooperation implemented. Botswana is relatively advanced in its labs. And there you see a Zimbabwe student, the gentleman to the left, with the traditional healer in Botswana, because our colleagues in the African countries had very good connections to the healers. The healers don't share their knowledge easily, just like a European country won't share its secrets with a competitor. I would be stupid to do that. And the healers know, okay, what are they going to do with the knowledge? So my colleague in Botswana has a 12-year track history of doing participatory research. So she takes the information back to where she gets it from. She's done that repeatedly, so people believe her. She's even put them on some of the healers on publication, on papers, and showed that to them. The healers are not stupid. They are uneducated, but they're not stupid. So you can explain a lot to most of them. This is an Ethiopian PhD student that spent some time in Halle, because in my labs and in other labs, he could do things he couldn't have done at home. No chance. And this is collecting plants somewhere in Tanzania. I benefited from traveling with some of the people. That was also very, very interesting, of course, eye-opening. Here you see an example of us in the German embassy in Botswana, and you see the topic of one of the schools, because we want to, of course, implement sustainability by teaching people. Education is so important. You mustn't lose the knowledge you perhaps acquire in incremental small steps. Participatory research tools and culturally sensitive documentation methods to identify bioactive medicinal plants, strategies for innovation, entrepreneurship. This is what we did together. It was a group of approximately 25 people that were actively included. And we followed 3 SDGs. We had 3 main SDGs, which are actually in line with our research. This is the SDGs, again, just a different graphic representation. In this representation, this is actually the source of the representation. You see they are sliced up in an economy, society, biosphere slice. So as for economy, our work, our research addressed, of course, minutely. I know that this is just a drop in an ocean, but still, we addressed decent work and economic growth, because if the people can grow the plants and sell them, use them as medicinal plants, this will be work for them. They get money for that. It leads to economic, at least sustainability, perhaps growth. We don't want to give gifts. We want people to be able to live their own lives with what God has given them. And the society aspect was good health and well-being, biosphere, life on land. Everybody knows the black rhino is almost extinct. But some medicinal plants, which are in traditional use, which are kind of needed in some African countries, are also becoming extinct. The healers or the herbalists have to walk longer and longer distances to find them. So this is an example, just a very concrete example, which I wanted to present so as to inspire you. Okay, how can I do research? not talking about private action or something. How can I do research that shows my interest in creation care? Why should we refer to SDGs? This is my final slide, but one. Why should we refer to SDGs? I think there are basically 3 reasons. I mean, we could do without that. We don't have to refer to SDGs. Perhaps we are required to because the university says, hey, can't we identify research projects in our university, as many as possible, which we can put on a website showing this university cares for the environment. Well, this is a lot of window dressing. I don't want to go into this, but still, as Christians, we can use this to show apologetically that we actually care for people, ultimately for people, for life. We care. It's a proof. It's a bit like Augustine in his City of God argued. Why does the Roman Empire come down? That was the problem in his time. Not why does the environment get worse and worse, less and less arable area, as Tony explained. In his time, it was like, why is the empire crumbling, the Roman Empire? It's you Christians, you are guilty of this. So he argued that the long duration and the power of the Roman Empire was not due to the pagan views, but to the Christian influence the empire had got in its later stages. So we also want to show, look, we Christians are not destroying things, we are very constructive. Like Tony, he's not against anything. Tony is not against something. He showed that he's for growing forests, making soil arable again. That's the kind of thinking we think. The Christian worldview is useful for our present time, and SDGs help us to see where there is need. I mean, they were not put together by stupid people that just had a political agenda. They were put together by people that have concerns. So they tell us about the present need, also tell us where the present need is ill-informed because it neglects the importance of God. The ultimate goal of sustainability is, I believe, individual humans. Because individual humans, me and you and everybody, we are eternal. The earth in its present state is not. So in whatever we are doing, I believe, as Christians, we should always consider that the individual counts. And this is typically Christian. There are cultures and religions that don't care about the individual, that would just care about the species, for example, the masses, the people as a whole, maybe the leading classes. But we care for every human, even if he's too weak and perhaps too disabled to even understand what we are doing. But that is the ultimate goal of sustainability. Caring for humans and the creation, of course, springs from God's commandments and His mercy, which we also feel. We feel it as an emotion, and if we transfer our emotions into mercy, I think that will help a lot. Because emotions that are just wild don't really help. Mercy does. Mercy is a good emotion. It works through us. We reflect God's love, attracting humans to Him. And we must not let ourselves be distracted from the task to spread the good news of salvation through Jesus. He came to die a ransom. Jesus didn't come and restore everything. He came to die and, of course, be resurrected. He was resurrected so we have hope beyond the present state of affairs. This is just some reading, which you also find in the outline. This is also in the outline. 2 of the books I have here. One I've seen in the bookstore. Don't know whether presently I can put them on the table if you want to have a look, because I think they are both really good. Robert White, a collection of essays, Creation in Crisis, and this book, Creation Care, A Biblical Theology of the Natural World, I think is very helpful in seeing the whole picture in the Bible. It's an exposition of many scripture passages by 2 US theologians, which I find I've really read it through, and also this one. And I find them really, really helpful to see what is the biblical picture. Some of it is different from as I saw it. Some I'm not sure if I completely share all the views, but that's not important. It's really very thoughtful biblical exposition.